God so loved the world, he continued to send prophets. This is the way I phrase it. So we believe that God continues to send prophets to mankind with the exact same message. Because from our perspective, theology does not change. God does not change. What might change are the finer details of the law. Perhaps one prophet prohibited one food item and the other prophet allowed it. These types of things are negotiable, but theology does not change from prophet to prophet. Moses and Adam and Noah and Solomon and David, the same God is the same God. And the same attributes are the same attributes. Theology does not change. And so from our perspective, and again, this is important to note, and I say this with utmost respect, but we have to know our differences as well. The fundamental difference between Muslims and Christians is obviously over the persona of Jesus Christ. That is where obviously we have very different understandings. We kind of sort of agree on Abraham and Moses and Solomon and David. Both of us view them as mighty messengers and prophets and people who came to, spread monotheism, teach the law. And these are names mentioned in the Quran. People are surprised to discover that the most common prophet mentioned in the Quran is the prophet Abraham and the prophet Moses. These two are mentioned more than any other prophet. Jesus is mentioned almost 25 times by name. Jesus, the son of Mary. The only woman ever mentioned in the Quran, an entire chapter named after her, is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And the Quran is very explicit that God says to Mary through the angel Gabriel that, "O Mary, God has chosen you and sanctified you and blessed you over all the women of the entire world," meaning of the entire creation. This is a verse in the Quran. I just quoted you the English translation. So we sanctify, well, not sanctify is an ambiguous term. We respect is the better term. We respect all the prophets and we consider them to be role models. And for our perspective, Jesus is a prophet of God, whom God sent with the same message that he sent all the previous prophets with. And he was sent to the children of Israel. And he was born of a virgin called Mary, and he was to be the final prophet to the children of Israel, because this is something I think the New Testament and the Quran agree upon. The children of Israel were veering away from the law, and they were disobeying the commandments, and they were finding loopholes or whatnot. And from the Islamic perspective, and I think the New Testament also mentions Jesus a bit irritated with some of the children of Israel. That
you could put it that way, yeah.
Yeah, just to be nice about this,
yeah,
but yeah.
Matthew chapter 23. Yeah, that irritation might be a proper term. Yeah.
Yeah, you get my point here. That there seems to be a frustration that they're not following what they're supposed to follow. So from our perspective, Jesus was sent as their final hope of salvation. Jesus is called in the Quran two things, either Jesus the son of Mary or Jesus the Messiah, because for us Muslims, Jesus is the promised Messiah. He is the Messiah sent to the children of Israel, and he was born of the Virgin Mary, and he came with the exact same message and teachings as the previous prophets. Monotheism, worship and love God with all your heart, and obey and follow the law. This is the fundamental difference that Christians and Muslims have, that it is important to recognize. And I'm not here to convert, even though honestly speaking, we would be happy if, conversion takes place, because we have to be honest here. We're not going to mince our words. Right. I'm not here to convert, but it is important we understand these differences. From our perspective, Jesus is a monotheist. He is a Jewish Messiah who followed the law, observed kosher, was circumcised, did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill and affirm the law. And Jesus never ever taught any doctrine that gave him a sense of divinity alongside with, or however you want to phrase it. Jesus taught that he was a mortal and a human. Now, when I mention this in churches, people get very surprised because never heard this. But to be a Muslim, you have to believe in Jesus. You can't be a Muslim the way we believe, obviously. Meaning, if somebody says, I don't believe Jesus was born of a virgin, he's not a Muslim. If somebody says, I don't believe God sent Jesus, he's not a Muslim. If somebody says, I don't believe Jesus was a mighty messenger, he's not a Muslim. You have to love Jesus and respect Jesus as a prophet of God. And we understand, and obviously this is where we disagree, we understand that notions such as redemption and abolishment of the law and the Trinity and all of these.
Crucifixion.
The crucifixion we'll come to in a while.
Okay.
We understand all of these concepts as having been introduced by other people. Muslim historians mention Paul, they mention Constantine, they mention the Council of Nicaea, they mention this and that. That's besides the point. The Quran is very explicit that Jesus did not preach the Trinity, and he did not preach his own any type of divinity, and he came to fulfill the law and preach to the children of Israel. He wasn't really meant for the non-children